30 years, the conversation that we're having right now, we will not be able to have.
In the next 30 years, does Britain become a Muslim country?
Could it become? British citizenship has become cheap. We shouldn't just be giving away citizenship like it's sweeties.
Diversity is a strength. People from minority communities want to live near a mosque, near halal food. One of our strengths is our diversity.
It hurts for someone to say nothing about your culture is real. We often talk about the rights of Britain's enemies, never the rights of the people in this country to safety. Even in the next 20 years, I don't think I would be able to sit here and say...
That is the Satanic Verses.
Precisely. I was on a panel and I brought with me a little envelope that I insinuated had a... And I could feel the tension in the room.
That is really scary. In the next 30 years, does Britain become a Muslim country?
We're projected to become...
Well, I need a yes or no. And
could it become, is the yes or no question.
Will it become?
Will it become? Could it become?
So we're going to talk about loads of things today, Islam, immigration, and you're one of the best speakers out there that there is. I love listening to you talk. I love seeing you debate, especially. I recently came across a debate of yours before asking you on with Owen Jones, who, well, I want to know what was that about? What was going on?
So we just gave citizenship away to all sorts of people like it's sweets.
Yeah.
Like it's a very cheap thing. Ala Abdel Fattah was this guy who was in prison in Egypt, and people might remember it turned out that we had given him citizenship, but he said all of these horrible things about the British, and so on. So we were discussing citizenship, whether or not this guy should have been allowed citizenship. And Owen Jones kept repeating over and over again, but he's a British citizen, but he's a British citizen. This was a man who would never set foot in the country until I think it was within the week before we were having this debate. So it relates to all of this stuff about, what does it mean to be British? But this guy was kind of on paper British, and therefore Owen Jones was just arguing he's British, he's British, he's British.
It's completely crazy, really. It reminds me of Starmer, and because it's a scary kind of over-reliance on law. And, if somebody, they forget that laws and these are made up concepts as well, and we can vote for them or we can agree with them or not. And Starmer, when he was saying that men can't have vaginas or whatever, and then the law changed, and the next day he was like, no, they can't, because whatever the law says, that's exactly what it is. You made a really interesting point too, Owen Jones, because he said to you, yes, but we don't just throw people out when they say the wrong things and so on. And you said, do you remember what you said?
I think
I do.
Well, if you do, you probably remember better than I do.
The point was that he wasn't a British citizen when he said all those things he said. That's an important point.
I mean, he shouldn't have been given citizenship in the first place.
What was his name?
So, Ala Abdel Fattah. But, the reason why the government or successive governments, because this was also the Conservatives as well, were trying to get this guy citizenship was in order to get him out of this Egyptian prison. And I think the case was, if I remember rightly, it was his mother had been born in the UK while her mother was studying for a PhD, and therefore his mother was entitled to citizenship, and thus so was he. And there had been some legal cases, I think, where it would have effectively meant that he's entitled to citizenship. It would have disrupted his right to a family life or something like that. So again, it connects to this whole debate about the ECHR and whether we should leave it. And so this guy he was on paper entitled to British citizenship. The point is that citizens and non-citizens have different rights, which to many people on the left, I think a lot of international lawyer types like Keir Starmer and Lord Herman, maybe they don't think this. They seem to think that the whole world is entitled to Britain and to our resources and to come here. But the facts remain that if you have certain rights, they only exist if they can be secured by something, by the state. So a British citizen has certain rights that a non-citizen doesn't have. And therefore, if somebody from another country says things about Britain that are anti-British, anti the British people, then why on earth should they be entitled to citizenship in the first place? So the point was, I think, from my view, that this guy should never have been given citizenship in the first place. And the debate also related to Shamima Begum as well, and whether or not somebody who commits an act of terror or goes to another country to join a terror group, as Shamima Begum did, effectively gives up their British citizenship, and whether or not she should be allowed back. And some of the people on that panel were arguing that we have a two-tier system where people who are of dual nationality are a sort of second-class citizen. But the point is that if you do have dual nationality, you actually have entitlements that British people don't have, because you're entitled to citizenship elsewhere. And so there are costs to that as well. And the cost is that if you do something that allows the government to strip you of your citizenship because you've got entitlement elsewhere, as happened in the case of Shamima Begum, then that's a possibility for you. And Shamima Begum wasn't the only person this happened to. This also happened to Jack Letts, Jihadi Jack, who was a dual Canadian citizenship. So this wasn't a racial thing. He was a white guy who was part Canadian. He was stripped of his citizenship for exactly the same reason. So I think it's the sort of crux of this is that British citizenship has become cheap, and that we have to return to this idea that British citizens have certain rights that non-citizens don't have, and we shouldn't just be giving away citizenship like it's sweeties.
It's quite a complicated one, isn't it? Because we had to get in there because of the dual citizenship rule of like, we can get, right, they're no longer part of us because you've got somewhere else you can go. With Jihadi Jack, for example, we had to get in there before Canada. Because otherwise Canada would, or if they got in there first and revoked his Canadian citizenship, we'd have to keep him. So I suppose it becomes a bit of a diplomatic nightmare because both countries, I don't think either country really wants him. And then Canada was sort of left picking up the pieces.
Yeah, you're playing hot potato with people's citizenship, which is an argument that, even people on the right have said we should bring her back here and try her here. But I think the government does need to be able to make these sorts of national security decisions. If there are lots of people who did come back because we weren't able to stop them from doing so, but if there is a way to stop somebody who's considered by the government to be a national security threat, and we don't necessarily have the whole picture on why they made this assessment, but surely we should be allowed to do that. When we're talking about rights, we often talk about the rights of Britain's enemies, never the rights of the people in this country to safety. But the first purpose of the government is to protect its people, is to defend the country. The primary purpose of government are to make judgments in order to protect the good in society and to defend society from external threats, right? So surely this is something that the government has to be able to have the ability to make these sorts of pragmatic decisions. And the reality is that when people do come back from these war zones, the chances of convicting them are very, very low because it's very difficult to prove what crimes have been committed in a war zone in a place like Syria or in Iraq, which is where Shamima Begum was. So if you can do something to stop dangerous people from coming to Britain, why wouldn't you do that? But unfortunately, international law does seem to be stopping us from being able to do that when we just look at the open border that we have on the coast with France.
Yes. Well, it seems completely crazy. Do you think people like the Owen Joneses of this world? Do you think he's being deliberately obtuse or just so ideological? What do you think is going on in his mind?
I mean, God only God knows what's going on in Owen Jones's mind. I don't know. I mean, I think that on the left there is this sort of it's not an excess of empathy towards those coming from elsewhere. I mean, Gad Saad has called it suicidal empathy. I don't know if that's quite what it is, but there does seem to be a distinct lack of empathy for the British public and really a lack of a sense of borders at all. And I don't just mean this in the sense of our national sovereign borders. I mean borders in the sort of broader abstract sense. You see this on the left with, the borders between what is male and what is female, the borders between the past and the present, and this attempt to enforce an endless year zero, endless present on our public sphere, trying to get rid of any sense of history. And I think you also see it with a lack of understanding of the legitimacy of the borders between one nation and the rest of the world. I think that those sorts of boundaries, for some on the left, for some reason, have become very difficult to legitimize. They just don't see any kind of boundary as being legitimate at all. And it's a kind of Promethean thing. It's a kind of view that you can make human existence whatever you want it to be. And maybe I'm taking this too far. I'm not saying this is, the crux of what Owen Jones was thinking in defending giving this guy citizenship. I think it's part of a broader picture of the way that the left view the world, view the political project, view society and human beings. I think there is this kind of Promethean perspective.
Did Prometheus make everything into everything?
Prometheus stole fire from the gods. So when I say Promethean, I'm basically saying a kind of hubristic attempt to make society perfect. You see it in all totalitarian projects. You see it in Islamism, fascism, communism, this view that you can implement certain things and it will fix society. It will make society perfect. There's no ceiling really on what human beings can accomplish. And the result of that is you create these totalitarian projects and instead of creating heaven on earth, raise up hell. And I think that is at least trickling into some of the left's view that there are no boundaries between these things because the world can be what we make of it. It's a very ridiculously and ungrounded, optimistic view of what human beings can accomplish. There's no sort of realism in thinking we need to have borders in order to protect our people, that everybody who's coming here from abroad, they just have this very charitable view of who these people are. There's no sense, a realistic, reasonable sense of danger or humility that actually when human beings often really badly screw things up, and that we therefore shouldn't be attempting to be so hubristic in our aspirations for politics. And actually what we should instead be trying to do is to protect the fragile systems that provide the freedoms and the rights that we already do have.
And that might be the difference then. So the left is just this utopian, let's try and make humanity perfect, and whenever we do that, everybody dies, but then we forget 10 years later and try it again. And then the right might be this kind of, hey, we're trying to be realistic here. We'd love for all that stuff to be true. We'd love for all those borders to disappear. Men can become women easily. Young can be old. Past is irrelevant to now. I like that point you made about all borders are just like anything is gone, any kind of restrict, except for, I suppose, the sort of the fence that goes around Glastonbury, which is barbed wire.
Or around Billie Eilish's house.
They're still waiting, the indigenous people, after she said, what was it, we're on stolen land, they're still waiting for her to give it back. I wonder if she felt at all like a plonker. Did she go back and go see some of the stuff that the indigenous peoples of Los Angeles or wherever it was saying, we're waiting for Billie Eilish's people to get in touch and give her home back, and go, maybe that was hypocritical of me, but they don't, do they?
Do you think she's in talks with the Native Americans?
Just have the house.
As we speak.
Have the house. Am I allowed to still live there? I will pay you for the... Well, she could afford to probably pay them a bit for it.
It's the same as the cognitive dissonance over climate change, right? Because and actually the same also with any of these progressive movements, including Black Lives Matter. It's always about arguing for systemic change. They want someone else to come along and fix the problems because it's not to do with their individual actions or the responsibility that they take as an individual. It's always lobbying for other people. Who are these people? I mean, society is made up of other human beings who should be taking responsibility for their own actions and so on, but it's always wanting somebody else to come and solve their problems.
Yeah, this is the issue we're facing right now. I think, we're talking a week or so after the Greens they won that, was it Gordon and Denton or something? Gordon and Denton. They won there, Zach Polanski won, and all the Owen Joneses have been saying, you thought that Muslims were very conservative socially, and actually that they voted for a gay Jew Green. What's your answer to that?
Well, I think it's pragmatic. I think that that people are voting along sectarian lines. They're voting because of the issue of Israel and Gaza. And Muslim communities, and also Islamists, I should add, as you saw during the Iranian Revolution, into partnerships with the left and make pragmatic decisions in order to, push a particular view, just as any other community would. But inevitably, they will end up coming up against the fact that if you're courting very, shall we say, conservative communities who are maybe not necessarily aligned on issues to do with homosexuality, for example, or other progressive issues, women's rights, then you are going to come up eventually against a crossfire. And you saw this also, on the Labour left when it comes to Islamophobia, that you had these protests outside of schools over the LGBT curriculum from Muslim families, and the left don't know how to handle that because they don't want to be accused of Islamophobia, but they don't want to be accused of any other kind of phobia either. And the fact is that just intersectionality is fiction. The idea that all of these intersecting groups are somehow in alliance with each other, they're not. They're all pulling in separate directions. So unless the voting is entirely pragmatic, which I think it is, the Greens will eventually come up against those ideological conflicts. But I think what you saw in Gordon and Denton was the success of a highly sectarian campaign, like using Bangla and Urdu to target a particular community. They've basically sort of created the playbook for future elections, not only for the Greens, but also for independent campaigners, independent candidates who were actually very successful at the last general election. So I think you're probably more likely to see people who are just campaigning on that particular issue without any of the sort of green trimmings. But the Green Party have just like completely forgotten about the whole eco stuff.
I never heard them talk about it. Yeah, I've never heard them speaking about anything green because they wouldn't get any votes. No one's interested, or very few people are. Do you think there's a chance that, I don't even want to call them the Greens, do you think there's a chance that Islamism could win at the next election? And if so, how long would Zach Polanski be allowed or able to stay in charge?
I don't think the next election, that if you look at what happened at the last election and just how quickly this style of politics has sort of picked up speed and traction, we had several independent Muslim MPs who were campaigning on pro-Gaza issues become MPs the last general election.
I don't partner with financial companies lightly because much of the system is based on trust and promises that can disappear. That's why I've partnered with Monetary Metals. They've built a strong reputation around something very simple but rare: treating gold, my name, as money, not speculation. Most people buy gold and let it sit there. Monetary Metals allows you to earn a yield on gold paid in gold itself, not in pounds or dollars that are constantly losing value. You can earn up to a 4% yield, and again, that yield is paid in gold, ounces, not paper currency. This isn't based on crypto, leverage, or financial gimmicks. It's a real business model that's been operating for almost a decade and has earned serious credibility in the sound money space. This platform is built for people who care about preserving real purchasing power. As always, don't take my word for it. Look into it yourself. Understand the risks and decide if it fits how you think about money. If you're interested, visit the link below where you can learn more about Monetary Metals and how earning yield on gold actually works. That's monetary-metals.com/heretics.
But also underneath the surface of that, we also saw a decline of the Labour vote by 29% of the Muslim vote. So Labour significantly lost hold of the Muslim vote. And then many of their very, very prominent candidates, people and MPs, people like Wes Streeting, Shabana Mahmood, they had their majorities significantly cut by these independent candidates. So even though there weren't that many overall that won, there are a lot of independent candidates who are nipping at the heels of Labour figures. I think that we've also seen a lot of success in this department in local councils. There was a woman who campaigned on sex segregation and won a council seat. So this is a real significant movement of Islam into politics across the United Kingdom. And I think at the next general election, we're likely to see more independent MPs. I don't know whether or not the Greens will be able to replicate what they did in Gorton and Denton elsewhere, if there is an independent candidate also running. I think I'm right in saying that in Gorton and Denton, they stood the independent candidate down. But I think you could see a much larger number of independent Muslim pro-Gaza MPs who are canvassing on sectarian issues, getting in at the next general election. I don't think it would be enough to form a government. You could end up with this sort of Islamo-communist alliance of smaller parties. That's not beyond the realms of possibility.
That could happen by 2029.
It could. But I think it's more likely that if reform were to get in and to screw up, I think trust in our democracy would be so completely dashed as reform is sort of the final hope, that I would be very concerned about the consequences of that for our democracy, because what we're seeing now is a move away from the civic understanding of our democracy, where it's one vote, one person, you vote for the candidate that you believe represents your views the best, to a kind of ethnic tribal voting. And that the consequences of that on our democracy, on a liberal democracy, is completely insidious. That is just the beginning of the foundations of sectarianism. It's not even balkanization. It's turning the UK into Lebanon.
And that's mad, because I guess I've been so fixated on what's going to happen in 2029. I didn't even think about what comes next. And you're absolutely right that if reform doesn't do well, and now reform won't do well because no political power ever does, no government ever does. I mean, I know the Tories stayed in for a few times in a row, but even then, I think people started to hate them by the second or third. Blair's third term, was it? That didn't go very well. Like, people get fed up, people get angry. It never goes well. And so the reaction from reform, no one's going to vote right. I think that's when the Islamo-communist regime does get in. And that would have been like 10 years ago, I'd have sounded like a conspiratorial mentalist. And even now, I'm sure they'll be like clipping it on the left, clipping bits of, look at this nutter who thinks this is going to happen.
Civil war.
Yeah, but I can't see how anything else happens now. By 2023, what is that what it would be?
2030.
What are we in now? 2026?
2026.
Shit.
What year is
2029,
it? Who am
2033.
Yeah.
My God. I can't see how anything else will happen. So do you think, I mean, it's so frustrating because we've been told if you talk about civil war, then you're a lunatic. But what does happen? What is going to happen?
Well, I am very troubled by what David Betts has said, that this academic who is an expert in civil war, he's studied civil wars in other countries, and has said that we have the foundations already here. It's, we may already be past the tipping point when it comes to the sectarian divisions in our society. And I think often, I'm sure that there are some people who are gagging for civil war, but very often people like us who are talking about this and saying, look, I'm really concerned about this. I think the writing was on the wall really from the beginning of multicultural policies that discourage people from integrating, that we have played a very dangerous experiment on the British people and on this country, and the costs are very high, and this could end very badly. And if you look at this in the broader context of the way that our politics has, well, not changed, actually, it's the fact that it hasn't changed over the last 30 years, that we've had these huge swathes of mass migration, that the British people have consistently voted against it. In polling, they've consistently expressed their desire to not have it. They never consented to it in the first place. They don't want it. Successive governments have failed to implement the will of the British people. It seems really as if the brakes are off the state, and the state actually can't do anything. Even when you have, as we did at one point during the last Conservative government, I thought we had a pretty dream constellation of ministers and special advisors, and still somehow it seemed that it wasn't possible to actually get done what needed to get done. And maybe this is partly because we're tied up in international law, that Brexit alone wasn't sufficient in order to achieve the sovereignty that we need in order to actually be able to execute the will of the British public. But the point is that the political class has drifted and drifted and drifted away from the British people. Both main parties, I mean, both the Labour Party and the Conservatives are now in a kind of death spiral, right? No one trusts the political class, which is why you're seeing the Greens and Reform as a kind of new unofficial sort of two parties that are vying, as we saw in Gorton and Denton. It was between Reform and the Greens. We've never seen that before. And I think people will look back on Gorton and Denton and think, this was a historical turning point. This was the point at which the roadmap for the future of British politics was laid. And I think we would have expected a kind of great realignment after Brexit. People were actually using the phrase great realignment. Suddenly the political parties are going to re-adhere to the views of the British public in some way. But then COVID happened. The great realignment was frustrated. We've had all sorts of reasons why people no longer trust the government, whether it's the way that they took people's liberties away during lockdown, the fact that they can't seem to get a handle on the small boats crisis, all of these things. So people's trust that democracy works has dropped off a cliff. And at the same time, you're seeing what David Betts calls negotiated policing, which is the police not really being able to go into certain communities. Instead, they negotiate with those communities about, what they're allowed to do in terms of enforcing the law. You have all these accusations of two-tier policing, two-tier justice. And what that does is it just fragments the foundation of a liberal democracy. Liberal democracy doesn't come from nothing. It grows out of a very specific cultural soil. And what we've done with the experiment of multiculturalism, and now what we're seeing, which is kind of like multiculturalism on steroids, what we've done there is salt the soil, basically, for liberal democracy. And what we might end up with is a very different political arrangements. Or if David Betts is right, and I hope that he's not, it could, potentially get violent.
And then what should people then, aside from voting, should they vote for, I suppose, reform, but should they be planning ahead and going, yes, I want to stay and fight for my country, but there comes a point when it just becomes impossible. And then where do you even go?
Dubai.
Dubai, which is
Seems
being
a lot of
bombed
people are
now
going
into
to
Smith.
Dubai.
I know a lot of people thought that, but now it's being bombed into smithereens. You're not supposed to talk about it. If you're in Dubai, they're being told not to. And then you live in an authoritarian regime, so you don't have that liberal democracy. You can't go to Australia or New Zealand really now. I think the same thing's happening there. You definitely can't go to France. You can't go to Europe. You can, Poland?
Asylum in America.
Asylum
if you
in
burn
America,
a Quran and they come for you.
But Tommy Robinson's currently going around Texas showing how much Islam is starting to infiltrate Texas, which is the one state I thought, some people are saying Arizona is going to be the last one to hold out.
But this is the point that people have made, is that the British people don't have an Israel to go to. There isn't somewhere that we can run to, and people need to stay and be invested in fixing this problem. I say that not knowing how we fix this problem, but part of it is, insisting that people have to integrate. The problem is now that we've gotten so far down the road that there doesn't seem to be any sense of, what we're asking people to integrate into, because the country's cohesion has been completely trashed. And going back to where we started with that conversation with Owen Jones, I think when I go on to these sort of mainstream media debates, BBC or whatever, there is this real sense, the people that I'm debating against, that there is no sense of Englishness. Instead, it's this, at best, it's these watered down, abstract British values, but they don't capture what we are as a country. And I actually think that's one of the reasons why people feel so deeply dispossessed, because the existence of England as a culture has just been completely denied. And so there's no sense of, what are we asking people to integrate into? Also the pace of change has been so rapid that it's just too fast for people to integrate. And people just go to a community where they already know people from their country back home. We're also living in a global society with the internet where people maintain their connection with the country that they came from, which also makes it very difficult because it's not. And I think that's probably a big part of this, is that multiculturalism coincided with the internet, and people are no longer in the new place that they have settled and becoming part of the community there. They can spend a lot of time back home because flights are cheap. They stay in contact with the politics and everything that's going on. So you have all these different communities that are still engaged with the politics and the sectarian divides in the countries that they've come from. And then you see brawls and stuff breaking out on the streets of Britain when, there's some kind of conflict between India and Pakistan. And then that constrains what our foreign policy can be here in the UK, which I think is also what you saw with Keir Starmer in Iran. I think he's, hedging his bets, because ultimately, and this goes back to, what you were saying about the freedoms, the only way that a society this divided can quell disturbances is to actually infringe on people's freedoms. It's not compatible with the rights and liberties of a liberal democracy, or the English rights and freedoms that we have inherited and should have inherited, because you have to stop different communities from offending each other from kicking off.
So you either have the multicultural dream, but it's also got to be the Lebanonization of us and make us authoritarian. If that's what you want, we become Lebanon, or we don't have this multicultural nonsense. And then we can keep some semblance of liberal democracy.
Yeah, I mean, you can't have the perfect example of this is the Quran burning.
Yeah.
And Hamit Koskan, who burned a Quran outside the Turkish embassy, was prosecuted for it. First, they attempted to prosecute him for insulting the institution of Islam, which is not a crime. When it was clear that that wasn't something he could be charged with, he was charged with something else. He was convicted for that. He appealed. It was overturned. The CPS then went for him again, trying to get that he'd had his conviction quashed. They then tried to get him basically reconvicted for it. They didn't succeed in doing that. But I think what this shows is when you look at it alongside cases like this man who had converted to Christianity from Islam, was an apostate, that he'd been kneecapped, hospitalized, his family's life had been made hell, and he's recently just gone to the United States because Britain couldn't protect him. So you can't have the freedom to burn a Quran or even to say something that is obvious for anybody who isn't a Muslim, that you believe that Muhammad wasn't telling the truth. Mm-hmm. You believe that, maybe he was mad. Maybe he thought he was having this stuff dictated to him, but it wasn't really.
Well, that's what Salman Rushdie said.
But the thing is that you can't say this, because then someone will accuse you of Islamophobia, or worse, they'll accuse you of blasphemy. They'll come for you. But of course, that's what non-Muslims think, because they don't believe that it's true, right?
No, infidels.
But the state needs to prevent people from saying those things in order to stop there from being violent. So like you saw in the Hamit Koskan case, it's what Toby Young called the stabber's veto. It was taken as evidence that this guy had done something really deeply offensive and wrong and possibly criminal, because somebody then attacked him with a knife saying, "I'm going to kill you," because somebody was, so riled up by this action that he felt that he needed to kill the person who was doing it. And this is not a situation in which you can sustain liberties. I mean, I'm a bit nervous, even saying what is obviously true.
Yeah.
I'm not a Muslim, and therefore I don't believe that it's true.
I think a lot of people have to do it at once. That's how they got Scientology. It's a much smaller religion or cult or whatever. There's only 30,000 of them, but they used to go after anyone who criticized them. But then with the internet, everybody just criticized them at the same time, and they were unable to stop everybody. Unfortunately, there's 2 billion people who are Muslim. Not all of them would be willing to fight for it, but a fair portion apparently would. So I'm not sure what we do. And you're absolutely right. By pushing out our own culture, by not really caring about our own culture and being subservient to another one. Did you see that Britain's Got Talent thing? I don't even know if it was now or if it just resurfaced. There's a video going around. It was like one of these really sort of, I don't know what the word is, twee or kitsch or what, like poems. It was a sort of spoken word white guy trying to be. You already can imagine how it went. Like it's like he thinks he's in the streets or something. And it started with like, "This is my poem to Britain," and it's that Britain is Turkish barbers. That was the first line. I was like, how is that what we are? Or maybe it was even England is Turkish barbers, and then it listed a whole bunch of things, none of which were English, and it got like this mad standing ovation. People are crying in the audience. Unbelievable, seeing this happen.
I think you see this every St. George's Day when people say St. George was Turkish or Georgian or whatever it is they say that he was, which is not true because the country didn't exist at the time when St. George was alive. But the same with fish and chips, or anything that is British is not British.
Yeah.
Tea, for example, it all comes from somewhere else. And therefore, there isn't anything that really is distinctively British. There isn't anything that is distinctively English. And you see why people are doing that. They're doing it because they want people to feel as if they're at home here. They want people to feel as if they are included. They maybe are saying it because they want to make themselves feel better about what has been lost. But the reality is, for the most of the British public, that sort of thing actually wounds them. It hurts. It hurts for someone to say that nothing about your culture is real or exists, that you, as someone who is, distinctively from this place, don't have any particular right to this place, that you don't really exist in any meaningful sense, that your culture is nothing. You wouldn't do that to another culture, you would regard it as wrong. I mean, it's one of the arguments against colonization, right? So, there's a kind of cognitive dissonance there, that it's not okay to do that to other cultures, but it is okay to do that to the English culture, to the British culture. And I think it hurts people, and it leads to this really deep sense of dispossession and powerlessness, which feeds into, like I was saying, that sort of lack of trust in the powers that be.
Like David Goodhart's Anywhere versus Somewhere people.
Yeah.
Because those who feel able to criticize our own culture tend to be the Anywhere people, who can just often live somewhere else, can be part of an international community, whereas those people you're talking about who feel wounded by this are Somewhere people. They're of a time and place.
And it encourages people to sever themselves, right? So it hurts much less to be transient. It hurts much less to root yourself in a place, because if you don't love, you can't be hurt. You can't be hurt by the loss of the thing that you love if you don't love anything at all, if you turn yourself into this roaming cosmopolitan type. But most people are not like that. Most people are Somewhere people who live in an area where their family have lived, hopefully for a long time. Maybe they're getting priced out of the area. But, people want to live where their family are. They want some kind of consistency over time in their area. They don't want to see their area changed beyond recognition and to feel completely powerless to do anything about it. And what's interesting is that you actually see this in some of the videos that have been circulating recently. So there was this, if you remember, there was the UKIP protest that got banned by the police in Whitechapel. And then there was a huge protest of Muslims who came out into the street protesting against the fact that there was originally going to be this other protest. And there was a video of a guy who's basically saying, these people are coming into our home. And there was another video of a street preacher. You remember these Muslims were talking to this police officer trying to get this Christian street preacher to leave the area. And they were saying this is a Muslim area. So that there is this sense within these communities that their community is their community, that it should remain with a distinctive character, in their opinion, a Muslim character. But that's not something that white English communities are allowed to feel, which is a very natural thing. I mean, you would say the same about any country around the world, whether it was Bangladesh or whether it was Japan. You would understand why people, wouldn't want constant upheaval, this constant sense of transience in their area, that they would want some stability in their life, because you can't feel at home when things are always changing. It doesn't make people racist to want some kind of stability. It's just wanting a sense of consistency and I think a very rightful sense of entitlement to the culture that you were supposed to inherit and the country that you were supposed to inherit, which has now changed beyond recognition, has become this kind of fragmented, febrile society where everything is politicized, where everything is tribal. No one asked for that.
Have you seen that Ricky Gervais parody, Equality Street?
No.
You should watch that. That is from like 15 years ago or 20 years ago.
Man's a prophet.
Yeah, he's doing like a rap video and he's going around and everyone's black and he's like, he's being David Brent. So he's like, look at here, he looks great. Look at, there's another black, we're great Muslims, we're all friends. And we have sort of turned into that. So I think he was well ahead of time. Let me ask you then, I want a yes or no answer, but I would of course ask you to extrapolate and give a more nuanced answer afterwards. Because otherwise it's it's a circus. In the next 50 years, does Britain become a Muslim country?
In the next 50 years?
Yeah. Or next 30. Let's go. In the next 30 years, does in the next 30 years, does Britain become a Muslim country?
Well, in about the next 30 years, we're projected to become minority white British. The Muslim population.
Well, I need a yes or no. Then we can extract. Then we can get into
could it become? Is the yes or no question.
Will it become?
Will it become?
It's an impossible question.
It's an impossible question. Could it become? Yes.
Yeah.
I think it could. 30 years is a long time. And if you have the speed of demographic growth that you have currently in the Muslim community, most Muslims are much younger than the majority population. They have more children. They're also a proselytizing religion, so there are people converting to Islam. We are seeing kind of Christian revival, separate thing that maybe we can talk about. But So you are seeing a growing Muslim community, and you are seeing a decline of the white British population that tends to be Christian or atheist, agnostic Christian adjacent. So their culture is Christian, even though they're not maybe a believing Christian, or maybe they don't go to church.
I'd put myself in that, because I grew up with all the Our Father who aren't in heaven kind of stuff at school.
You were an Anglican Jew.
Yeah, it basically was.
Isn't that the joke? Are you a Protestant Jew or a Catholic Jew?
I haven't heard that, but it makes sense. I mean, like, because we just grew up, and like most Jews I know, we were just like at Christian schools and doing all the Christian prayers. We did Christmas. We did all the hymns on, those kinds of things. It was just, but that was the culture.
Yeah.
Go on.
I think, the Muslim community is very different, right? Because it's very religious.
Yeah.
Younger people as well are more religious, more conservative in the Muslim community. Also, you add to that sort of domestic demographic growth, the fact that we can't seem to get a handle on our borders, and a lot of the people, maybe most of the people, are coming from Muslim countries. So we've got a constant influx of more people who are Muslim. I think, as we've already seen in the major cities, Birmingham, London, where the white British population is already a minority. And obviously, when you say the white British population is a minority, you're making a cultural point there too, right? So I think what you will see for sure almost within the next 30 years is that there will be huge swathes of the country that will be majority Muslim. And that will have an enormous impact on our politics and our democracy for the reasons we already discussed, which is that Islam is inherently political in a way that Christianity isn't. So it will involve itself more in politics. It will affect the issues that become dominant in particular areas. And in a democracy, politicians will appeal to those things because they want those votes. So it will change the way that the issues that our democracy focuses on and the way that our democracy functions. And then there are also other issues. I know we discussed this when you came on my podcast, that on the New Culture Forum, that you also have cousin marriage and things. So that creates a much more sort of tribal basis for democratic decisions. So I think you could see our democracy I think you will see our democracy seriously transformed within the next 30 years for sure. But I don't know, does that mean we become a Muslim country in the sense that even if we had a minority Christians in the United Kingdom, we're still the largest number of, there are more Christians than there are of any other religion in the UK still, but it's less, I think, than 50%. We're still a Christian country. No. Because our institutions, our laws, everything about our politics and society has been shaped by Christianity. I mean, as I was saying, that soil from which liberal democracy grew is distinctively Christian. So it depends on how much of that institutionally changes. We're seeing it institutionally change now with, greater inclusion of, like Ramadan and other Muslim festivals as a kind of almost unofficially established as part of the state. And there are people like Tariq Madood, who is an arch multiculturalist, who has been pushing for not for religion to be removed from politics, but for other religions to be more represented. So a kind of multi-establishment where you have Islam also kind of established within the state. That would transform our society as well. So, I mean, it is a bit nuanced. I don't mean to equivocate.
No, but the idea that could even work, that's another example, I think, of people expecting us to sort of be beyond human, superhumans. We're going to be the one country where all of these competing ethnicities and religions are part of the state and all just compete and are absolutely fine, and there's no problems.
And you can't secure freedoms without having the sort of doctrinal basis that allowed those freedoms to emerge in the first place, in my opinion. So Christianity is very different from Islam in the sense that it has this very eschatologically different view of where politics stands and what politics is for. So because Christians are waiting for the coming of the kingdom of God at the end of time, the period of time that we now live in, the seculum, which is where the term secularism comes from, is not a time when our institutions or human beings can be perfected. Nothing we do can be perfected. And so politics is put in its place. It is a very specific realm that is there for, protecting certain goods, but not for achieving perfection. It's very anti-utopian. And it carves out this secular space where there can be religious freedoms, freedom of speech, and so on. Islam is very different to that because it doesn't have that same eschatological patience. It views Sharia law as something that can be implemented in the here and now. And it's a very, very different understanding of what politics is and what politics is for. And I don't think that you can have the freedoms and liberties that we have in this country without the Christian basis of the state. And that has been, foundational from the very, very beginning. And there is no evidence to suggest that you can secure the kind of society that we have without Christianity. We are unique in human history for what we have achieved. And this experiment of multiculturalism, this attempt to set aside our own culture and to argue that all cultures are equal and should have an equal place, it's a very dangerous experiment that has and is trashing the fragile frameworks that allow these freedoms to exist and allow us to, be able to have conversations like we're having today. I would wager that in 30 years, the conversation that we're having right now, we will not be able to have unless something really drastic changes.
Wow. That is really scary, though.
Well, even in the next 10, 20 years, I don't think I would be able to sit here and say, what I obviously think about Islam, which is that I don't think that Muhammad was telling the truth. To say that now, you feel nervous, right?
Well, that is what Rushdie said, isn't it? That is the Satanic Verses.
Precisely.
I think people think he must have said something mental. Like he must have said we'll kill him or whatever. And it was literally it's like one page in the middle of the book where...
that unfortunately the title comes from.
But where Muhammad is going behind a bush and going, oh yeah, and then coming back out and going, I can have as many wives as I want, and pretending to listen. That was it. It was like a little satire. Yeah. It's like nothing compared to what's been said about Christianity, Judaism, whatever.
So if you can't do that now without feeling a little nervous, like I did I was on a panel at the Battle of Ideas Festival, and we were talking about sectarianism. David Betts was one of the other people on the panel, and I brought with me a little envelope that I insinuated had a picture of the Prophet Muhammad in it. And I could feel the tension in the room. Wow. Is she going to get out this picture of the Prophet Muhammad? It was an empty envelope. Yeah. But that was to make my point, because we can't do that now, right? So in 10, maybe even less, in 10 years' time or less, what will we be able to say? We already have the CPS pushing to try and effectively bring in a backdoor blasphemy law, in this case of Hamid Koskan. We have the government trying to introduce an Islamophobia or anti-hate definition, which would also potentially be a backdoor blasphemy law. There are already effectively limits on what people can say or do, because as the teacher in Batley was driven into hiding for showing a picture of the Prophet Muhammad, then you know that if you do these things, then you might have to flee your home or even the country. So where do you think we'll be in 5 or 10 years' time? Almost inevitably, unless something very dramatic changes, we'll be in a much worse situation. And I already know, Jewish friends of mine who have moved to Israel because they're worried about the rising tide of anti-Semitism here. Our society is changing beyond recognition.
Yeah, and you know what? I mean, I've had this chat with a few people on the sort of more towards the ethnic side, or whatever, that side, who have said that point, like, we can't just move to Israel. But what I would say is, and I get that, but it's not a, I know it is for some people, but it's not a dream for many people, because we're talking about a country the size of Wales, that is mostly desert, that is, has this unforgiving climate.
Is extremely dangerous.
Extremely dangerous, surrounded by just like the largest countries, and some of the largest countries in the world, just endless people who hate them. Mm-hmm. And we're not just talking about Gaza. I mean, just huge countries where they all hate you. So in this tiny little bit, that's, size of Wales, mostly deserts, a few small cities. So it's not like a fairy tale off we go. I mean, some people might like it, but
Well, I know someone who's moved there recently with their young family. And I think, how unsafe must you feel to go to a country that is, I mean, it's a perpetual war, but currently is in a hot war.
Yeah.
You must feel so unsafe and so exposed here in the UK to take your children to a country that is, obviously so unsafe, but is at least willing to fight for you. And I think that's the motivating factor for a lot of Jews who are leaving Britain and other countries and going to Israel, is that they know that they will be defended there at least. Whereas here, it seems that the authorities, the police, they don't give two hoots about standing up for the Jewish community. They're worried about community sensitivities when it comes to, stopping a, UKIP Christian procession or whatever it was they wanted to do in Whitechapel. They're worried it's going to provoke the community to attack them. But they didn't care about all of the hate marches and all of the anti-Semitism that was on our streets week after week after week. They didn't care about, the way that the Maccabi Tel Aviv football fans were treated. I think it is our national shame that there are Jewish people in this country who feel that they have to go somewhere else because they're not safe here.
Not to mention that somewhere else is 20% Muslim, so it's actually more than double demographically than the UK.
Depending on where in the country they live.
In Israel.
In this country, depending on where in the country you live.
Yeah, but well, that's absolutely true, yes.
Because you could move to a majority Jewish neighborhood in Israel or from a very highly Muslim area in this country.
That's true. But it still is part of. I mean, but the difference is Israel does rule with a little bit more of a. It's not authoritarian. It's very democratic, but they do come down a lot harder on Islamic extremism, and I think people understand that. The Muslims I spoke to in Israel, firstly, they're extremely fortunate to be in Israel rather than most of the rest of the Middle East in terms of their rights. Although a lot of them, you can imagine, secretly not telling me they hate Israel or whatever they secretly think, but they're really quite submissive, because they haven't been given that kind of multiculturalism. We celebrate you. They're just, you can live here and coexist. And it was remarkable to see that they weren't sort of pushing for no, we need to get Islam into the schools. It was like, no, you don't even think about it, mate.
Well, we've incentivized it here, haven't we?
Yeah.
The policy, for years, the policies, not just in the UK, but across Europe. You mentioned Salman Rushdie, but also the Danish cartoon affair, Charlie Hebdo, all of these cases where people's freedom of expression was being trampled on by people who were threatening violence, and the state didn't do anything to protect those people. They didn't do anything to stand up for their rights. It was completely spineless. If you think about those school kids who scuffed a Quran, and then there was, the mother made this apology, and rather than taking the death threats against the children seriously, all of the focus was on the fact that these kids had scuffed a Quran that one of them actually owned. I don't think it was scuffed on purpose either. They just brought it into school and it had gotten damaged. The state is just, I was going to say it's not willing to stand up for, but it always kowtows to those who threaten violence, who threaten to kick off, and what that does actually, it incentivizes violence and disorder across the board, because it suggests that if you are more aggressive, then the state will leave you alone. And that's really a very, very dangerous thing for the state to be incentivizing. Yeah. But across the board, the Hamid Koskan case is it's a good example in the sense that, the CPS weren't successful in actually getting him convicted. But at the same time, the guy who came after him with a knife was given a suspended sentence. So I think we're incentivizing the worst behavior through multicultural policies where we say we're not going to stand up for women's rights, for example, when it comes to the way that Sharia courts might discriminate against them. There have been people like Baroness Cox who have been working away on this for years and no one's really done anything about it. That if you're a minority within a minority community, the state's not really going to stand up for your rights. If you come here and you seek asylum from another country because you are an apostate there, or maybe you've been accused of blasphemy in another country, and you come here to the UK, oh well, sorry, we also can't protect you here because we've got the similar problems that are developing. So then you end up with people having to go and seek asylum in the United States. We've created a situation where it's not safe for Jews. Obviously, that's why people are moving to Israel, and it's not safe for anyone either.
No, gays, women, Christians.
Yeah.
What's a quick fix here? Like, what's someone gets in, Farage gets in. What's number one?
I don't think there is a quick fix, and it keeps me awake at night that I don't know what the solution to this problem is. The first and most obvious thing is that we need to stop migration now. We need to entirely stop. Not a single small boat should be coming across the channel. Anyone who comes here illegally should not be allowed to claim asylum. We need to drastically reduce the numbers of people coming here until we can get a control on the situation that we already have here, because all that's going to do is exacerbate it, continue to contribute to the chaos and all of the tensions and problems that we already have. That seems to me to be the first, most obvious, straightforward fix. The rest of it, I'm not sure how you deal with that. But I mean, enforcing the law equally is an obvious one. Policing equally, making sure that the police are not doing this two-tier policing. They say, even saying to say two-tier policing is maybe some sign of far-right radicalization, rather than just, it really is Orwellian. It's like, don't believe the things that are before your eyes.
Yes.
We see the two-tier policing. We see that it exists. People have experienced it. So I stop two-tier policing. Stop with the two-tier justice, enforce the law equally without fear or favour, and stop more people coming in until we can deal with the problems that we already have.
I think we're at war with our own people.
Mm-hmm.
That's pretty scary stuff. On that note, I've got one more question for you, but where can people follow you and find you and stuff?
I'm on Twitter, Emma_A_Webb, which is my pre-married name on Twitter, or just search Emma Trimble on Twitter. And I am also hosting a podcast with the New Culture Forum, which you can find on YouTube, which you very kindly came on very recently.
It was great. It's a great show, so I hope people will follow. I'll put a link to it in the description. Who's a heretic you admire?
Salman Rushdie. Even though I don't agree with him in general.
Well, he's gone a bit woke, hasn't he?
Yeah, politically I don't think we're aligned, but I admire him for his bravery.
Yeah, bloody hell. They were slow to stop the attacker, I think, because he shouldn't have been able to get that close to him.
It's crazy he managed to, stave off the fatwa for all those years, and then somehow there was a sort of a little gap in his security. I don't know.
It's unbelievable.
It's a very brave man.
It's a very brave man. I love the satanic verses. You're not even you shouldn't compliment it, because then you get. I mean, they even killed the translator. That's what's mad. The Japanese translator was killed because of what was in that book.
Well, I could name so many people. I mean, all of the guys from Charlie Hebdo, who again I don't agree with. They did horrible cartoons of Christianity, but I completely defend as a Christian their right to do so.
Yeah.
So anybody in the Middle East who converts to Christianity.
And give me a word on Peter Whittle, because you were, you're now in his seat.
Yeah, Peter, for those who maybe don't know him, led an amazing career. He started off doing sort of like film stuff. I think he was in America, and he was a politician here. One of the sort of foot soldiers for Brexit. Did a lot of campaigning with Nigel Farage. Set up the New Culture Forum. When I was 12 years old, so that's how much foresight he had that culture was important to politics. So he set up the New Culture Forum, and just a great, great man. I mean, so many people who have gone on to be influential in this fight have come through his doors at NCF, and he sort of put me in front of a camera for the first time. So I owe him an awful lot. And he was an amazing man, an incredible friend, very loyal, very kind, like wicked sense of humour. And we all miss him a lot.
A beautiful man. I'm going to ask you another couple of questions on Substack, which is on andrewgoldheretics.com. Do go follow Emma Trimble. We'll put a few links and things down the bottom. Hit like and keep watching this show.